Welcome to the penultimate talk at What the Fuck is Cloud Native? After this, we've got networking and DJ dancing. So what could be more, if you want to call it steampunk or cyberpunk, I'm seeing it all over today. Awesome. We could also call it. So thank you all for joining. Please do continue to share what you're learning because nothing in Cloud Native should be in isolation. That's the whole point about connecting people, processes, and technology. Next up, we have just someone that really knows that, the co-author of Team Topologies, Manuel Paiche. So please welcome and share and ask questions. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming, Manuel. Obrigado.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. And yeah, I'm afraid I'm not on theme. And I'm on the way of the DJ dancing, so it's not a great start, but hopefully the talk will be worthwhile. So I'm going to talk about business and technical agility with Team Topologies. This is not a technical talk, as you might expect. The ideas I'm going to talk about are based on the book Team Topologies that I co-wrote with Matthew Skelton. And this book is really about sort of thinking tools and patterns and also some constraints that we should be thinking about when we're structuring our operating models. So obviously there is a relationship with cloud native. I'm sure that you've seen several talks today that highlight the importance of having that cloud native approach to become more agile as well in the way that we can evolve our services and our technology. And so in Team Topologies, we talk about how can we think about organizing teams and interactions between teams in a way that we can address the challenges that we're facing today and in the future. So I'll be talking about what is business agility, being agile, what does that mean versus doing agile, why product mindset is so important when we're trying to achieve business agility, and I'll finish with a couple of examples of applying Team Topologies. So how exactly does Team Topologies help with business and technical agility? Well, there are a few different aspects. First, it encourages decoupling of business concepts to help make the organization more responsive. It also provides patterns that help us think about moving away from blocking compliance checks and approvals and all of those aspects of the life cycle that tend to slow us down into self-service, flow-aligned, API-driven checks. Team Topology is also partially sense-making approach to help organizations gain situational awareness and therefore agility. In other words, to better understand where are we today, what are the gaps we have in our teams, in our skills, in our approach, in our delivery, in order to increase that agility and be able to respond faster. And finally, Team Topologies helps the organization to focus more tightly on its core mission by understanding what are the actual streams of value that we're providing to customers and to the organization overall, and also helping align teams to those streams and limit cognitive load. Because if teams are overloaded, if they have so many things to think about and to worry about to be able to deliver any kind of change, that's not going to be very agile, right? Even if we're following all the ceremonies. So what exactly do we mean by business agility? Obviously, you might find many different definitions. For us, it's the ability to respond really rapidly to changing internal and external conditions. So we're talking about responding in hours, not in weeks or months, right? And the importance of business agility, not just the buzzword aspect that yes, everyone wants to be more agile and business wants to be more agile, but some of the reasons that we need this more and more have include, for example, being able to support remote first, dealing with the speed of change today in terms of technology. And obviously, if you think about cloud native landscape, it evolves really quickly and it's very wide. So how do we leverage that in our benefit? But also other kinds of changes that are happening, even climate, geopolitical, market changes, obviously, with the pandemic as well, that also caused the need for many changes across organizations. And in general, this trend that there is more and more competition, the barrier to entry on almost any industry is now much lower than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. So when you think about fintech and also in insurance and all this kind of more used to be traditionally industries where you had only certain big players, and now you have a lot more competition, right? So all this leads to the need for business agility, not just to say that we have it, but actually these are some of the reasons why we do have to care about that. And then also, if we're looking for business agility or striving for business agility, we should also have answers to some of these questions that I'm going to show next. So we need to be looking at how do we optimize the flow of change? How do we get to a rapid flow, fast flow, where we're able to quickly identify what are the needs of the customers or the organization? How do we find solutions, and we experiment and we validate in order to get those needs to be met by our technology, by our services, etc. So to do that, we need to look at where we need to optimize, what are the places in the life cycle where the wait times are being introduced, where we don't have fast flow. Also, how do we make sure we're focusing on user needs, right? So we can't say that we're we have business agility if we're not actually answering the user needs, right? Then why would we be why would it matter to go faster if we're actually not helping our users, we're not helping the organization meet their needs? And finally, how do we know when we have to course correct? When do we need to adjust? So we need ways to kind of sense when things are not going the right direction, when we're not helping customers, or we're not delivering at the speed that we should be delivering to actually meet those needs in a timely fashion. So business agility means that we'll be looking to answer these questions to achieve business agility. And being agile, obviously, is much more than just following certain ceremonies in a framework. We want to be looking at what actually do we need to have in place to support agility and therefore support the business as well. And I'm guessing most of you are familiar, or many of you are familiar with the State of DevOps reports over the years, analyzing thousands of organizations. And some of the things they found obviously include the fact that, which is now pretty obvious, but the use of cloud is predictive of software delivery performance and availability. A few years ago, this was not as obvious. And so that's why this report and the things it brought to light through research have been very helpful to help sort of guide the industry in the right direction of higher performance and more agile organizations. It also brought to light what are the key technical practices that high-performing teams and organizations follow, so that there's a correlation that has been found. And obviously, some of these are directly benefiting or directly supported by cloud-native approaches, obviously. And the book Accelerate condenses the results and the research that has been done throughout the years with the State of DevOps report. Again, I think most of you will probably be familiar. If not, I highly recommend getting a copy, because this book really provided insights on why are certain teams high performing, what are the things they do differently that help them be more agile effectively and deliver and have faster flow. And the book also found a correlation between these 4 key metrics and high performing teams. So lead time, how long it takes us to get from an idea until this idea or this change is available to customers, how often we're able to deploy, what is the mean time to restore and change fail percentage. So again, having cloud native approach helps with this metrics as well, but obviously it's not the only thing that we need. And so we need good technical practices. We need to have our deployment pipelines in place to provide fast feedback. Obviously, we need other technical practices like TDD, for example. Those things are important for teams to have higher pace, to have that sort of agility we're talking about beyond just following a certain framework. And so besides the technical practices, we also need teams to have more ownership, to have services that are fully owned by teams, right? And not sort of what sometimes happens, that we have an architecture where certain parts are owned by certain teams and others don't have owners, and it becomes very messy. And so it becomes hard to change and to respond to customer needs if we don't know who is the owner of the services that we're providing. And obviously, when we have monoliths, this also becomes a problem. And we need other things, pretty basic by now, but we should have configuration and version control, and then all the things that cloud native provides. I'm not going to go into the technical aspects because I think that other talks do that much better. But we know at the high level, cloud native provides more transparent operations, better scalability, recovery from incidents, all these things that we need to have in place. It also obviously supports automation and getting things done in a much faster way. But when we have these great platforms and this cloud native approach, to make the full benefit from those platforms, we often need to also realign architecture and think about how we need to change to identify what are the actual streams of value within our systems, especially if we have monoliths. And so techniques like domain-driven design can help us untangle business concepts in our monoliths. For me, I find it interesting that when we talk about monolith as if it's a technical aspect only, because usually the monolith comes from over time, different business concepts have been built into this monolith without a concern for or explicit intent to separate different streams, which is what domain-driven design helps us to do. There are other techniques as well, but domain-driven design is quite helpful with that, so that we identify what is really our core mission, what is the value that we provide that is differentiated from our competitors. Wordly maps. If you're familiar with wordly maps, you know that they help increase situational awareness and apply the right techniques and think about the evolution of what we offer, from being perhaps starting as a custom built offer to kind of productizing this offer until maybe it becomes an utility. And so this kind of strategic view of what is the landscape, not just in our organization, but in the market and in our competitors, And so we can make better decisions on where to invest our efforts and how to we kind of place our teams in the right scenario to follow the evolution of these offerings. So from a strategic point of view, Wordly Maps is quite helpful, and it actually works quite well with team topologies. When we're talking about what types of teams should we have in place, what should be their behaviors, what are they trying to achieve, and how do we get to fast flow, rapid feedback, etc. All those things map really well to Wordly mapping, because at different stages of the lifetime of a service or an offering, we might need to evolve and change what types of teams do we need. So if we're productizing an offer, we might need to have more kind of platform services, because this tends to be more stable, and so we can move some of the aspects of this product into the platform. While if we're in the kind of initial stages of custom building this offering, then we probably need the streamlined teams to own that offering. But I'll talk a little bit more about the types of teams in a minute. With team topologies, what we're trying to do, and this kind of set of techniques and patterns and types of teams that we talk about in the book, the goal is to achieve rapid flow of change, right? So going from the idea of, okay, we want to have agile teams, but these teams in isolation probably cannot be fully autonomous. The team, what we need is an ecosystem of teams, right? We need team of teams, if you like, so that with different types, with different missions, we can, as a group of teams, achieve fast flow. And also that we can get feedback quickly from our systems and integrate in the next versions of our service. And what happens is, in kind of traditional ways of organizing teams, we tend to have handovers. We tend to have dependencies between teams, where one team has to stop and wait for another team to do something for them, whether that is provide some infrastructure or run some tests or deploy our application to production. Whenever there's this transition of work between one team to another team, we have a handover, and that's where the flow and the speed gets kind of slowed down significantly. So we joke that handovers can kill flow almost. The more handovers we have in the life cycle, the worse it gets. And so ideally, we would like to have stream-aligned teams, what we call stream-aligned teams, that have end-to-end ownership of a service, right? So from understanding customers, understanding what are their needs, what are we going to provide, making the changes, building, deploying, and then running the service in production as well. So being responsible for the live environments. The sort of build and run teams, if you like, but also with kind of the understanding of the business domain as well, and understanding of how to do good product and service development that's focused on validating that what we're doing helps the customers. And then we have other types of teams, that what we generally talk about, supporting teams, so that overall is the grouping of all these different teams that can allow us to have fast flow, not just individual streamlined teams. So we have enabling teams, typically a team of experts on some domain that brings that knowledge, brings those skills to the streamlined teams, right? So when we talk about end-to-end ownership from ideation, let's say, to production, that is a very large skill set that's being requested from that team. So these enabling teams bring that knowledge in a sort of curated way by reducing the learning curve for the streamlined teams. We have platform teams, or platform groups of teams, usually, where they provide kind of lower level services that help reduce how much stream-aligned teams have to worry about. So this is where obviously we would expect to see teams running, for example, Kubernetes or any other kind of technology, so that the stream-aligned teams can benefit from that. But it's quite important, how do we provide those services to the stream-aligned team? So it should be in a self-service approach. And complicated subsystem teams are kind of an exception when we do have a very complicated, that requires very specialized knowledge, part of a system, which we end up requiring a dedicated team for that. We should try to avoid them if we can, but there are some specific situations where we might need them. And then we talk about interaction modes between teams. We talk about collaboration, access to service, and facilitating as very specific ways in which we expect teams to interact. So collaboration, we have two teams working together to solve a problem or to find a good solution, or find what does a good API look like. If we're maybe trying to build some new platform service, how should that API look like? So whenever we need to have two teams kind of coming together to find a solution for a period of time. On the right side, we have facilitating. That's typical for enabling teams, helping other teams learn. But it can happen between any two kind of teams. When one team has the experience, has the knowledge to help other teams kind of upskill and bridge some gaps that they have. And Next as a service is like infrastructure as a service and any other similar approach, where we're applying this idea internally, right? So especially for platform teams, we expect that the services they provide internally at some point can be consumed in this acts as a service way, meaning they are stable, they are easy to understand, they're easy to use. That is critical. And so just like we use AWS services or any other kind of third-party services in this way, we should aim to do the same internally. And so we can get to this point where we have the ability to talk about our organization or part of our organization by understanding what kind of teams do we have, how do they interact, how are they related to each other, what are they trying to achieve, and what do we need to do next. And especially for fast flow, one of the things we should be looking at is tracking dependencies between teams and separate the ones that are blocking from non-blocking. So when we say blocking, we mean we have one team is working on a change, and they have to stop and wait for another team to do something for them. Non-blocking means the self-service approach, essentially, where we do need help from a platform, for example, to run certain services for us, things like monitoring, observability, deployments, etc. But in this self-service way, so that we consume that platform service, we are responsible for those actions, but we have help by the services that make our life easier as a stream-aligned team. So in general, we want to remove the barriers to flow, which come in the form of handoffs, handovers very often, approval gates, manual inspections, whenever work has to stop and we have to wait for another team. And ideally, we want to replace that with self-service APIs. Of course, in certain areas like compliance, this requires a mindset shift from kind of the permitting and being the gatekeepers and saying, okay, you can do this or you can't do this, to enabling, right? How do we allow you to do those things in a safe way? This shift is not easy at all. It's difficult, but if we want to really achieve fast flow at scale, let's say across the entire life cycle, we need to really focus on this. And so we kind of need to scale the expertise. We can't rely on a handful of teams that are gatekeepers or that control how we do these things. So the question is then what would we need to do to continue to be compliant, to follow the regulations and the rules, when at the same time we want to have multiple loosely coupled flows of change that different teams are working on, and different streamline teams are working on. And so again, the answer is at least to a large extent to focus on self-service APIs and enabling teams. So we can think about having domain experts around compliance governance acting as enabling teams, helping streamline teams learn about these things at least to kind of a baseline level where they have a good understanding of what are the main risks, what are the main things we need to be worried about and to care about. And at the same time, provide as much as possible sort of platform services that help us achieve this compliance. So people like John Willis, for example, have talked a fair amount about compliance as code, right? And we're seeing this sort of pattern in this approach to become more popular. For fast flow and for business agility, the product mindset is also critical. We need to always be focusing on customer needs, whether the customer is external, the customer that's actually buying or paying for our product, or it's internal, whether if it's streamlined teams in particular using, being customers of the platform. We need to have a product approach. So what exactly is a product? If you are familiar with Marty Kagan, he's quite well known as a thought leader in this space in product management. And he says you can't separate the form and the function. And so you must have a holistic view of the product, which includes not just the functionality it provides, but the design, how you monetize it, and the content, if it's user-based content in particular. And so we have obvious examples from Apple and other companies where we know the product is not just the functionality, because other competitors offer similar functionality, is how it is provided as a holistic experience. So there are some key aspects of a product that we should be looking at. First, it's optional to use, right? No one's forced to use a product. I'm not forced to buy an iPhone. I can buy an Android, or I can buy something else. If we go into a shoe store, no one's going to force us to buy any of them, right? We have a choice. A product is also carefully designed and curated, or at least we should say successful products. So we focus on what are the tasks that the users of this product need to get done, what are the workflows, what are the things that will make life easier for the customers. A product also should be simplifying something for the users, a task or some kind of job of something that they need to do. And so I like this example, old school, but this is a pretty good example of simplifying a task when at the time someone wanted to hear a song and all they had to do is put in a quarter and pick the song, right? They didn't have to deal with the vinyl or whatever it had to be, whatever it was using to play it. All you had to do as a user was put in a quarter and choose a song. We should have this mindset that it's not just providing the functionality, is actually making it easy to use. And it should take advantage of technology changes. We know that we can't get stuck and not follow where the industry in general is going, because technology will evolve, and if we're not careful, we're going to be stuck with technology that is no longer supported or evolving. if we have a product focus, we have a strong focus on user needs. And that's where good software emerges. Focus on the user experience. And again, we're not talking just on the products that we sell or we provide to end customers, but also internally. How do we make good software for our internal teams? How do we improve the experience of using this software for developers, testers, anyone that's involved in the life cycle? Ideally, the software should get out of the way, between quotes. We want to design for usability as a key concern, right? Not just functionality. And that means when we're talking about internal platforms that we want to apply this idea, this product approach, we should be remembering those aspects of what makes a product, right? So it's optional. That means platform ideally is optional as well. We're not forcing teams to use the platform. If they have a valid reason to use a different service, maybe an external provider service, if there is a good business case for that, they should not be prevented, right? Obviously, you hope there are conversations happening with the platform team so they understand why is the service we're providing not meeting your needs. Is it because it's lacking some use cases? Is it because it's hard to understand or not reliable enough? Can be a number of reasons. But if we force the platform internally, then we set sort of the wrong incentives, right? And thinking of it as a product is much more helpful. But it means as well that platforms must advocate for their product and market it to some extent. Not that it's going to become the core focus of the platform teams, but it's something we need to be doing, talking to teams, also explaining what do we provide, how does that help, give good examples, all these things. So platform for us is really a curated experience for engineers, the customers of the platform. We actually came up with this definition after the book was already published, but it really talks to the idea of thinking about and focusing on the usability of the platform, on providing an experience that makes life easier for our engineers in our organization. If we're just sort of in a corner building platform services that we think are going to be useful, but we're not really talking to the teams, we're not really looking at how do they use the platform, what are the things they find difficult, then we're not providing a curated experience. We're likely not providing a good experience for our internal teams. And so the value of the platform is much lower, even if we mandate the platform. So to finalize, I'll give a couple of examples of applying team topologies after the book came out. In the book, we have a number of case studies from companies like Adidas and IBM, but they were talking about specific patterns, specific situations, right? But now that the book has been around for more than 2 years by now, we've been publishing some examples of applying team topologies on our website. And so specifically around platforms, you have the USwitch example. I'm going to talk about the Cross example, and also a little bit with Foot Asylum. So I recommend having a look. I think there are some really interesting stories. I'm going to talk about a couple of them. Foot Asylum for people in UK, which I guess probably the majority in this conference, you're probably familiar with Foot Asylum. So it's been around for more than 15 years and has 2,500 employees. So it's not small. It's not a huge company, but it has a reasonable size. And in 2019, which is when the book was published, they actually were dealing with a number of issues in terms of being responsive or having that sort of business agility. The work was highly fragmented. The focus was fragmented. They had a team of product managers in UK and then teams around the world, where you can see here that some teams were kind of considered development teams. Other teams seem to be focused on part of on a specific service or part of a system, like checkout team and so on. So you can see there's kind of mix and match, and there's not very clear types of teams and mission of these different teams. And so what they were facing was really very long lead times to get changes, and a lot of coordination that was needed between the product management team and the teams that were implementing the changes that were needed. And so when they found out about team topologies, it made sense for them to start looking at what actually are the streams of work that we have, what are the services that we provide, who are the customers that we support with these different services and streams. And so they came up with this new model, let's say, where they were trying to get teams to be more stream aligned, and they understood that what they used to call service team was really a sort of platform team, and that they wanted to move towards that self-service approach. They also combined this with wordly mapping that I mentioned earlier, to really understand the sort of the landscape of what they offer and the different services, and understand where should they be evolving to, what should become commodity, what needs to be custom built because it's a differentiator for us, etc. And so, again, based on where the services and offerings are kind of placed in this wordly maps, then we might realize that we need certain kinds of teams or other kinds of teams. They have achieved much more clarity of purpose by using the team types and interaction modes. So now it's, I would say, much clearer compared to the initial picture of which teams exist, what are they focused on, what is their mission, and even how do these different streams and services relate to some extent. And then what is the platform, what are the services being provided, and who is consuming those services. So we can have this sort of snapshot view of an organization at the moment in time. Obviously, this is going to evolve, and maybe this data enabling team is going to disappear if we already have the skills around maybe data analytics in all the stream aligned teams. But it gives us the way to reason about where are we today, what are we trying to achieve, what teams exist, what is their mission, and what do we need to do next. So they use the ideas of stream aligned teams focused on business domain, keeping the platform as thin as possible, meaning focusing on the services that are really valuable to our internal teams, and not trying to build everything possible, but actually what is really going to help our teams accelerate their flow, accelerate their delivery. Looking at the team interactions and the evolution of teams, and combined with wordly mapping. For product management, this was actually quite helpful to be able to validate the roadmaps, understand when do teams need to interact, when are there changes that cross different boundaries between teams, and then they're going to need to have collaboration periods. It helped them set better roadmaps and validate them. It actually improved communications during COVID as well. So thanks to Paul, Martin, Andy Norton for sharing this case study with us. Finally, the other case study from Uswitch, which you're probably also familiar with. They're leading comparison switching service in the UK. And so what's interesting about Uswitch is around 2010, they really focused on autonomous teams, and they said each team will be focusing on one comparison service, right? One team looking at energy provider comparison, one team looking at broadband provider comparison, and so on. And this worked well for a period of time, because each of these teams with that autonomy was able to move quite quickly and make the right decisions and experiment. But over time, what they start to see is each of these teams now has more and more cognitive load. They have more and more services they use in AWS, more and more tools that they use that they have to maintain. All these things were kind of building up, and effectively teams felt like they were much slower in delivering business value compared to a few years before. And so the interesting thing here is this graphic showing how many calls they were making to AWS services, effectively a proxy, let's say, for cognitive load, right? How much teams had to worry about all these aspects of just to be able to deliver and run their service, not even talking about focusing on the customers. And so Paul Ingalls, who is CTO at USwitch, said people were spending a lot of time to interact with low-level services and thus spending their time on low-value decisions. And so they introduced a platform based on Kubernetes, but really the focus is to take away some of this cognitive load from streamlined teams. And that was quite successful. And over time, that graph looked like this, which is a good thing. It means the number of direct calls to AWS by the streamlined teams was going down, and they were using the platform to perform these tasks and to do these activities that before they had to really worry about all the details, and now it was taken care by the platform. This approach was quite successful, so they ended up actually building, expanding new platforms around consumer data, affiliate marketing, and other things. The example is on the website on teamtopologies.com, so you can have more details. It's also an interesting article I wrote for InfoQ on Kubernetes being a foundation for this type of platforms, but there are all these other things you need to have in place, the interaction modes with the streamlined teams. And so we need to think about that as well if we want business and technical agility. Of course, we need technology, but we also need to understand what makes a good platform is also the way the teams behave, the way they interact with others. So for USwitch, the sort of engineering-based principles of team topologies, of loosely coupled streams and teams and high cohesiveness inside each team was really helpful. They really focus on curated platform experience, reducing complexity and cognitive load for teams, and addressing cross-team needs. We thank Paul Ingalls and Tom Booth for sharing their story from USwitch. So I'm almost at the end. Really, the idea for today was to look at how can we respond rapidly to changing external and internal conditions. That should be the aim from our perspective of business agility and technical agility, to be able to do this. And for that, we need situational awareness, clarity of business purpose. What are the streams? What are our value streams? How do we align teams to that? As well as all the technical practices that we need to have in place. And focusing on the user needs, both for external customers as well as internal customers. And we look at a couple of real-world examples. If you want to learn more about team topologies, we have a lot of resources on the website as well, infographics, and now there's an academy as well. And that's it. Looks like I went just up to the,
yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, obrigado, Manuel. That was super interesting. You could have gone as steampunk. Steampunk. There was
Next
a miss on there, but I didn't miss it. I particularly really like the nuanced language around permitting and turning that to enabling. I think that's a beautiful thing that actually managers need to do a lot more of, and we all need to in our lives. So with consent.
Yeah, it's applicable in many areas.
Well, thank you so much, obrigado. I know there's people really excited to download or order your book, and I think flow is a wonderful topic, and so is stream for values. So thank you so much, obrigado.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
And thank you, What the Fuck is Cloud Native crowd. We have well, you can have a personal dance party, you can have a personal listening party, whatever is accessible and your desire, or you could just spend another 15 minutes meditating. So I thank y'all so much. We've got 15 minutes of our extreme cyberpunk, rock it out music DJ fest. And then we have our last keynote. And if you don't feel like listening to music, you can go visit all our sponsors: Instana, Teleport, HP, Cockroach DB, Harness, and Shippa. Visit one or two of their booths and learn more about their products and services so they let this conference go on. Thank you so much. See you soon.